welcome to another episode of Halftime on the Hudson. I'm Matt Spirio here with Nick Vete. Nick, I gotta say, we've been here 4 years together. We've never hosted together for the first time. How are you excited for this?
It's actually kind of wild. I'm excited. Normally I'm up at this desk and Pat Taylor's sitting here. So, I like this change of pace. Let's talk some sports.
Yeah, let's do it.
Hey, this is fantastic. First thing we're going to kick off talking about is the men's NCAA National Basketball Tournament. Down to the Final Four. We've got some teams that maybe are a little bit of surprises. Some top-tier teams still left in there. But either way, it's an intriguing thing to discuss. So I think the first thing we're going to kind of kick it off talking about, Matt, which of these two matchups is the most intriguing to you? Is it FAU, the Cinderella story, versus San Diego State? Or is it the UConn Huskies going up against the Miami Hurricanes?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are kind of relying on this UConn-Miami matchup to be that better game because these are the known teams. But to be honest with you, I don't really care too much for that game. I want to see the two mid-majors go at it. Two teams we were not expecting at all to be anywhere near the Final Four. Obviously, FAU, they were a 3-loss team. We knew they were going to be pretty a tough out in this tournament, but I don't think anyone had them in the Final Four. And it's San Diego State who grinds their way through games. They grinded past Alabama. They grinded past Creighton. I think that kind of clash of styles is going to be very, very interesting. And I think that's the game that is going to be slightly more attractive, even though it might not necessarily be the two better teams. I'm definitely looking forward to watching that game a little bit more. A mid-major in the final. That's pretty exciting.
It is exciting. And you know what else I like about that matchup, too, is the fact that SDSU, for as long as they've been known, they've been a defensive school. And that's their MO, like you talked about, just grinding it out game in and game out. And FAU, they want to kind of push the pace a bit more, shoot the three ball more. But honestly, it feels like they can grind out some wins, too. They've been in a lot of close games in this tournament. So I think that definitely is an intriguing matchup. What do you make of this other matchup, though? I mean, it's a high-octane offense in Miami going up against this UConn Huskies team, which has just been world beaters. I mean, seemingly blowing out every opponent they've gone up against. Recently, just handing it to the Gonzaga Bulldogs. I mean, what do you make of that matchup?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone expected Drew Timmy's college career to end exactly how it did. Just running into an absolute buzzsaw. That's the way that I describe UConn right now. They look as good as any team has looked all year. The way that Hawkins and Newton are shooting the ball is problematic for anyone who tries to guard them. And then you got Sanogo and you got Klingon down low, and it's just like they're a nightmare. There's absolutely no way to guard them. Jackson is one of the best glue guys in the country. He's had double-digit assist game, double-digit rebound games. He come out there and he'll score 10 points if they have to. Does whatever they need him to do. He makes stops on the defensive end. UConn is going to be a problem, and I don't think unless Wong and Miller from Miami combine for 60, they're going to have a chance against UConn. They just look way too good, but I hope I'm wrong. I hope we get a better game, but I'm not too confident.
I'm very high on UConn as well, and I was really kind of hoping Texas pulled that victory out because I think the idea of Texas going up against UConn, two real powerhouses all throughout the college basketball season, would have been great, but that kind of leads me to my next point here. I mean, is it kind of a little bit of an underwhelming Final Four that we got here? I mean, were you hoping that it maybe would have been some of these other teams that were in the Elite Eight getting through?
Yeah, I think that the way the Creighton San Diego State game ended, I think a lot of people were looking at Creighton on that side of the bracket to kind of be not necessarily the blue blood, because Creighton is not by any stretch of the means, but a slightly more established program who were at least more palatable for people who don't watch a lot of college basketball. And they kind of lost in unfortunate fashion on the foul call, and to see their season end like that when they had just really only gotten healthy, just a few weeks ago and really starting to hit their stride. I think that was unfortunate. I'd say that was if there was one team that I wish was still playing, because I think FAU, they really have worked through some tough teams, but they earned their spot here. San Diego State against Creighton, that's the one for you. What are your thoughts? I'm curious. They're a team that you wish was here.
I just brought up my point about Texas, which, I mean, yes, I do wish they beat Miami. But the team that I was really, I was getting right up in that bandwagon with was Kansas State, man. I really loved the way that Marquise Noel, I mean, to me, he was the most fun player watching college basketball this season. And I think he was really showing out at the tournament. I mean, FAU got the better of him. But not only from that standpoint of, yes, they were a very good team, and yes, Marquise Noel was a star, but also the fact that they just had storylines as well. Coming into the Big 12, expected in the coaches poll to finish dead last. Keontae Johnson, obviously the story, collapsing on the floor at Florida, betting on himself and going to Kansas State. And, I mean, just to see this team kind of go on that run and have it fall short, I thought they were really kind of destined to make a run to the finals. And I think that they would have been just as exciting a matchup going up against San Diego State or Creighton in that Final Four round. But wasn't meant to be. But, hey, we'll enjoy this tournament, how it shakes out either way. Hopefully we get some good games.
Absolutely. As it goes in the world of sports, as one season kind of comes to an end, another one begins. And college basketball, maybe not the most excited Final Four, but we got baseball opening day tomorrow, Nick. I know that you are very excited.
We do.
I know you're very excited. Talk to me. You're our in-house Yankees expert here. What do you make of the decisions we've seen with the Yankees opening day roster?
Well, I told you before this. I mean, tomorrow, anyone in the back you guys paying attention, don't try to get a hold of me from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock tomorrow. It's not happening. I'll be locked in on my couch watching this game. But, I mean, you just brought up the point, Anthony Volpe making the roster. You know what? I like it. I like it at this point. He showed out in spring training. It's like, why not have the kid take a shot? Here's the thing that I've been telling everybody I get really excited about with this decision is the Yankees, really for the last, I'd say 5 years, and you can even go longer than that, have always taken their time with these prospects. Fans are always chomping. Come on, get these kids up here. We want the homegrown guys in the Bronx. And the Yankees always take their time with them. Some of them have, solid showings with the Yankees. Some of them play really well. Some of them it really pans out, like Aaron Judge, obviously winning the MVP last year. He's had a great career so far with the Yankees. And others, we've seen it kind of fall to the side with a guy like Estevan Florial. But what gets me so excited about the fact that Volpe's coming up right now, they're saying 20 at-bats in AAA, doesn't matter. This kid's ready for the big leagues. That tells me that there's no need for them to let him develop further. They know he's ready right now. The old saying is no organization knows their players better than the one that those players are with. I think that's true in this scenario, and I think it makes sense that they're calling up Volpe. So I'm excited to see it happen.
No, absolutely. I think it's a good shakeup for that Yankees infield that has just not been as productive on offense I think we would have liked to have been over the last few years. Obviously, now you have Peraza going down AAA, which is interesting. Gleyber Torres possibly on the move. We'll see how that infield shakes out. But I'm also curious, what are your thoughts on the current outfield situation? No Harrison Bader, possibly Aaron Hicks playing in left field and Judge in center. I want to pick your brain a little bit here about how you see the Yankees outfield kind of shaking up.
The thing that really intrigues me is I want to know 2 over-unders on the season. I guess I'll pose them to you because this is kind of what I've got going in my head. Giancarlo Stanton, over-under 60 games in right field, and Aaron Judge, let's say over-under 25 in left field. Because those are really going to be contingent, I think, especially early on in the season without Bader, on kind of how this defensive alignment in the outfield is going to go.
Yeah, I think that both of those could go over. I don't know how much juice Aaron Hicks has left. Oswaldo Cabrera is going to be an interesting little piece in this whole thing. The fans love him. He doesn't mean he's the best baseball player. I think his production is going to be a key component to this, but I think you are going to see a lot more of Stanton out and right, and Judge and left is just interesting. But he can put him anywhere, I guess. I think both those numbers should go over. I think it really depends on how long it takes Bader to come back. The timetable is really up in the air. I'm hoping it's sooner rather than later, but I don't know. I'm a little bit worried to see how they're going to move those guys around.
I'm just curious how much the organization, knowing how much Aaron Judge played in center last year, and they were already kind of trying to pull back on that a little bit, and now they're kind of thrust into this situation where already they don't really have a choice, and he's going to have to play kind of, outside of right field where obviously the organization would like him to be. But you know what, while we're on this topic, I'm going to switch gears a little bit here and kind of go back, because I feel like a conversation that just hasn't been had at all throughout spring training is how Aaron Judge is going to follow up the historic season he had last year. And I feel like nobody's really given enough attention to hey, how's he going to fill the shoes of the stats he put up last year? This is his first year as the captain. How's that going to affect his game, if at all? I feel like this is something that hasn't really been, there's been no spotlight on it. And I feel like a big part of that is, again, going back to the spring that Anthony Volpe has had. And I'm just curious. It's something that hasn't been talked about a lot. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that. And maybe am I wrong? Hasn't been talked about more than I maybe pick up on.
No, I think you're certainly right to a certain extent. I think that's something that really, really quickly in the season, if Judge comes out and he struggles for, 10 games or so, it's immediately going to be picked up. Shouldn't have paid him this money. The Yankees put themselves in a hole. All these things. I think that those first 10, 15 games are really, really going to be crucial for that kind of discussion. Because if he comes out and he looks like Aaron Judge, no one's going to bat an eye. Everyone's going to say, oh, it's just Aaron Judge being Aaron Judge. But if all of a sudden things turn for the worse, the Yankees maybe fall in the hole a little bit early, that's when I would get worried, and you're going to start hearing those kind of things of, is he able to live up to these expectations? But
I mean, if he goes 0-4 on opening day, knowing Yankees fans are going to be flipping a lid. But which is the bigger, this is my last thing on this, which one is the bigger storyline here? Or which one is going to get Yankees fans more up in arms? If the Yankees, through their first 15 games, have Judge struggling mightily or have Volpe struggling mightily? Which one's the bigger deal?
I think people be more upset if Judge is struggling. Because if Volpe's struggling, they'll just start calling for Peraza, they'll call for whoever to play shortstop. There's a replacement. There's no replacement to hundreds of millions of dollars. That's gone. That's Aaron Judge's now. It doesn't matter how well he's playing. That's his. So I think that is something that's going to be just slightly more concerning. But we move past the Yankees now.
We will. Tomorrow's
Let's go across to Flushing, the Mets. I'm curious, what do you think the biggest surprises of the Mets opening day roster?
I mean, I'm honestly surprised the fact that really none of these kids we were talking about made the roster. I mean, Mark Vientos down, Brett Beatty not on the roster, Alvarez not on the roster. So, I mean, that's the biggest surprise to me. I mean, you talk about a guy that struggled all last year in Eduardo Escobar, didn't have a good spring training, and yet, he's still going to be getting reps over these other guys that are down in the minor leagues. So, again, it's kind of that thing where it's like they're kind of playing the Yankees' more typical route here of, hey, we'll keep the young guys down in the minors for a while, and then, down the road they'll call them up. And really, to me, I feel like it's kind of time, especially with a guy like Vientos. I mean, for me, it's like get him up here. I know he also hasn't had the greatest spring either, but, it's kind of got to get to time with some of these prospects that have been mulling at AAA for a little bit with the Mets. Alvarez is a little bit different in that regard, but get him up here to the big league roster. It's time for him to go.
That brings me to my final baseball question here. Which style do you think? These are two teams that are contending. It's not like the Yankees are bringing up young guys because they want to see them play. These are two teams that are contending, but the Yankees, they're willing to a little youth infusion into this, whereas the Mets, they're kind of going, veteran heavy here. Which style do you think is gonna prevail ultimately as the season progresses?
I mean, I think we've just seen the Yankees get close in the past couple of seasons, and now if we can really get that injection of youth, a full season of Oswaldo Cabrera kind of playing all over the place, Anthony Volpe, coming here, maybe a full season, we could talk about the bullpen, back Michael King healthy, a young guy, Ron Marinaccio, no more of this Scranton shuffle with him anymore. I like the infusion that the Yankees have. I think they need kind of that dynamic. So I really like what they're kind of going with. Again, I do think that the Mets will eventually call some of these younger guys up, and obviously you never go through the whole season with your opening day roster. But I like what the Yankees have put together so far. There's still some question marks, but supposedly Aaron Boone has been super high on Josh Donaldson. A lot of that I'm sure is just the manager trying to boost him up a little bit before opening day. But if they can get some of these question marks answered, like we kind of talked about, and you get some production from guys that were maybe a little bit unproductive last year, I think things could really start to look good. And I got to tell you, both of these teams added to their rotation. I think that's really going to be the deciding factor when we get to October. Which of these rotations is healthy and which one are performing as we expect now at the start of the season? Which one is performing the way we hope they do in October?
Absolutely. So, I mean, we'll see as that playoff push comes around, which of those two teams is in better standing. Speaking of playoff push, let's close out today with a little bit of NBA. The Western Conference is a mess. There's about 45 teams within a game and a half of each other. There's about 6 games to go in the season. It's very convoluted, and every game is so important. Personally, I would like to start by saying I don't think I've cared this much about NBA regular season basketball in a while. This is exciting. There's reason to watch games in March.
The parity is fantastic. That's something we haven't got enough of. I mean, I personally got sick of Cavaliers against Warriors every single year while we were in high school. So now, I mean, to really get some true parity back in the game, I think it's fantastic. I think you've got 3 teams in the Eastern Conference that can really, run it up as well. And then, like you said, the Western Conference is just wide open. But I ask you, there's some teams with some experienced veterans down near the bottom. Obviously, LeBron James and the Lakers. Your Golden State Warriors and Steph Curry down near the bottom as well. What do you make of the path for them to potentially get back to the finals or at least make a run? Do you think that that's possible? And who's who's the team you want to see in the first round, if any?
Okay, well, I'll start with the Lakers. I'll leave my Golden State Warriors aside here. The Lakers, if LeBron can really come back, be healthy, if Anthony Davis can keep playing well, this kind of new-look team that they assembled at the trade deadline hasn't really gotten to play together. So they're a very intriguing team, especially in the play-in, because you never want to see LeBron James, and you got to win one game. That's someone you just don't want to see. All of a sudden, they get in as 7 or 8, and they get to play Denver or Memphis, some inexperienced playoff teams. They played in some playoff series, but neither one has made a serious deep run. So that's not a favorable matchup for the Lakers, but certainly one where I wouldn't count them out of it. I'll move now to my Warriors, where they currently sit as the 6th seed, and we get to play Sacramento, which I think would be a very favorable matchup for them. Listen, we all love Sacramento. It's a great story. But again, very inexperienced. The Warriors, the way they look right now, that they've been playing okay. When they're at home, they're a lot better than on the road. I think the real big X factor, and it's the X factor not just for the Warriors, not just in the Western Conference, but I think the entire NBA, is Andrew Wiggins. If Andrew Wiggins comes back and he's healthy, I don't think there's a better team than the Warriors. And that just might be a homer take, but if Andrew Wiggins is legitimately healthy, and not healthy, or he's mentally sound, whatever it is that he needs to do to get back on the floor, I don't think there's a team that's better than Golden State. But with that being said, he's not currently healthy, and he's currently not. He's currently away from basketball. He's having personal issues, so I think that's the biggest problem right now.
Well, this is the point I wanted to raise, and I wonder if it's just as simple as this. Could the answer for who's coming out of the Western Conference be as easy as which team has all their players on the court when they get down towards the final rounds of the playoffs? I mean, we've seen the Lakers deal with injuries, the Warriors deal with injuries. You just detailed the Andrew Wiggins situation. Ja Morant obviously had to take time away from the Grizzlies. The Clippers have dealt with injuries. So, I mean, Kevin Durant away from the Suns. I just, didn't even bring that up yet. But for me, I feel like it's really, what team gets to the second, third round of these Western Conference Finals and has their team all together? And for me, I know that they've been kind of up and down of late, but I really like what the Nuggets have put together this season. And again, they've had Jokic on the floor. They've had Jamal Murray on the floor. I like what they have put together this season. They're my personal team right now.
Yeah, I mean, the Nuggets are, they certainly are going to be a team. I'm obviously going to pick my Warriors, but if it's not going to be my Warriors, I think I would probably go with the Nuggets. I think that's the route that I would go. Not the Suns.
Not the Suns. I'm fully out on the Suns.
I think that the KD injury is like the reason why the Suns it's like just pushing their title the next year.
It's a sign.
It's a sign that it's not gonna happen this year.
All right.
So that's all the time we have for you here on Halftime on the Hudson. Nick, it's been a pleasure doing this with you for the first time.
Great, first time.
Yeah. So hope you guys.
Potentially the last time we do it together.
It probably will be. This could be.
It's actually maybe my last time. Just outside of the mock
It will be.
draft.
Do you want to close this out?
You know what? Well, we got Prove Your Point coming up next, but other than that, it's been a pleasure talking with Matt, talking with you. We've got Prove Your Point coming up next, and we will see you next time here on Halftime on the Hudson.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another segment of Prove Your Point. I'm your host, Nick Vete, sporting my Sunday best tonight in honor of my professor, John Brickley, who's been busting my chops all night. I'm going to introduce our guests real quick. We've got a great segment coming up for you. First, we've got my friend, also in the senior class with me, class of 2023, Brian Brain Ramos. Brian, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty good, Nick. Thank you for having me. I'm excited for a good debate.
I was not the one that put you on here, but I am happy you're here. So thank Matt Spirio or Rob DeFelice. And the other contestant we have here tonight is Derek Fun Size DeGallo. Derek, lovely evening. How are you doing?
Pretty bad, to be honest with you, but things are going better than anticipated. But we'll see how I'm feeling after this one.
All right, let's see how things go. Maybe your night will get a little bit better here. So we've got 3 topics coming at you, and we're going to start off with one in the NFL. Lamar Jackson, a hot name right now in the NFL landscape. So I ask you guys, Lamar Jackson, where is his best landing spot? Brian, we're going to start off with you.
All right, so out of all the possible landing spots for Lamar Jackson, the best fit's the Indianapolis Colts. They have the 4th pick, which is not good enough to get C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young, the top 2 quarterbacks in that draft class. They're most likely with the 4th pick, looking at QB 3 or 4, Anthony Richardson or Will Levis. Both reviewed as inaccurate. So they kind of need to get a franchise quarterback here that they haven't had since Andrew Luck. Colts offense led by Jackson would be the best offense he's ever played in, with superstar running back Jonathan Taylor, superstar wide receiver Michael Pittman. They also got Alec Pierce, who's in his sophomore campaign, who looks promising. They signed Isaiah McKenzie from the Buffalo Bills, best wide receiver core he's played with, if he ends up going there. The Jets wouldn't make sense because they're focused on getting Aaron Rodgers. Panthers ruled out because they just traded for the 1st overall pick a couple weeks ago. The Commanders could be a solid option, but the whole Dan Snyder drama, being disgruntled there, and also Ron Rivera's already made Sam Howell their head coach there. The Patriots is probably the worst spot, honestly, because of as good a coach as Bill Belichick is. He's never really dealt with a mobile quarterback. Also, a wide receiver room of Juju Smith-Schuster, TikTok God, Devontae Parker, and Kedrick Bourne just simply will not cut it. The Falcons won't work because they have the 8th pick in the draft, so they'd get likely outbid by other teams. Also, just like the Patriots, their wide receiver room's not great either. Yes, they have Drake London and Kyle Pitts, but Pitts had a down year last year. Also, London will most likely get double teamed because the newcomers Matt Collins and Scotty Miller are simply not good enough. So I just think that the Colts is the match made in heaven for Lamar and company.
All right, there's some interesting points there. I like how you also walked us through some of the reasons that these other teams aren't necessarily good fits. But we're going to flip things over to Derek now. Derek, tell me who you believe is the best team for Lamar Jackson?
It's the Atlanta Falcons, and it's not even close. You look at this Atlanta Falcons roster right now, every single player is mediocre at best. They need something to get going. They haven't had a quarterback since Matt Ryan, and let's be honest, when Matt Ryan was the quarterback, did they really, really work? Not totally. And you talk about Lamar Jackson as a whole. He's a quarterback, but he's more of a runner than he is an actual quarterback. The system that Atlanta has in place right now, their offensive coordinator was with the Titans earlier. They wanted a more mobile guy at quarterback. That's exactly what Lamar Jackson does. And you talk about all these weapons that, the Colts have or all these other teams have. Well, guess what? With Lamar Jackson, you don't necessarily need to have all the weapons because of him being able to, run the football as well as create for himself. He's an absolutely stud. You talk about the run game as well. He impacts the run game for the Atlanta Falcons as well because he's got the ability to run the football, pass the football. And if you talk about the Atlanta Falcons, you look at system fit, they don't have a deep threat guy. Lamar Jackson doesn't throw the ball down the field. He talks about short passes in the short pass game, not deep down the field. That's exactly what works. And you talk about who's the best fit. It's the Atlanta Falcons because their defense is solid. You talk about all these teams. You want to talk about packages. You can do that all you want. But the Atlanta Falcons, at the end of the day, need a playmaker. They need that guy. Lamar Jackson is that guy, and he can do it for the Atlanta Falcons without a doubt in my mind. It's pretty clear. I don't know anybody that can say that the Atlanta Falcons aren't a perfect destination for Lamar Jackson. It just makes too much sense at this point. I don't even see a reason why he shouldn't be in a Falcons uniform right now.
Both of you guys bring some great points. Neither necessarily the teams that I would say myself. I think the Patriots are honestly a really good fit for him, given what they've kind of built, both on offense and defense. And I think him and that scheme could work. But, both of you guys talking about these teams, I just think the points that Ramos brought, I wasn't sure at first, but I like the argument Ramos made. I'm going to go with Brian on this first one. But, hey, we've got 2 more rounds to go, so we're going to move on here. What team from the American League is going to the World Series in the MLB this year? Derek, we go to you first.
The Seattle Mariners. Quick and easy. Julio Rodriguez, he's an MVP candidate. Luis Castillo, Cy Young candidate. Logan Gilbert, Cy Young candidate. You look at all these teams in the AL just in general, do you see teams to have 2 Cy Young candidates on their roster? I don't. I just don't see a team that has 2 Cy Young candidates and an MVP candidate. You talk about this roster and what they've done. They've added Teoscar Hernandez. I understand you lose the bullpen a little bit by trading Eric Swanson, but you add outfield help. That's exactly what they needed. And their defense, you talk about middle infield. You got Colton Wong and J.P. Crawford. That might be the best, middle infield defensive combination right now in the American League. That combination is deadly up the middle. I understand that the hitting is not there, but you talk about their defense, their pitching staff. Robbie Ray is a name that's not mentioned enough. He's a guy who can be a Cy Young candidate. He had a down year. That's 3 guys that I think can win the Cy Young. 3 guys that can make the Cy Young. That's absurd. Julio Rodriguez is an absolute beast. You talk about maybe question marks with the offense. I think Ty France is an underrated player. He can play first base. I get it. He's not going to hit a home run every single time. He's not a power guy. But guess what? He can get on base. It's not necessarily all about hitting home runs at this point. You talk about bases. You want speed guys. Baseball is kind of adapting with all the rule changes. They want to see more speed, more contact. The shift doesn't really impact too much, but Kalenic as well, he could be an interesting piece for them. The Mets traded him, top prospect, and he hasn't really got anything going, but I think the shift was a huge reason why. And you look at this Mariners roster up from top to bottom, it just is so much better than every other team. And the fact that you look at their schedule, obviously everybody's schedule is the same, but their pitching staff to me is one of the best in all of baseball right now. And Julio Rodriguez, everybody talks about, he was, close to winning the Rookie of the Year. You can arguably say that he's the best player in all of baseball.
Those are some great points, Derek. I really like a lot of the stuff that you touched on here. We're going to switch things over to Ramos now. Ramos, tell me who you think is the team that's going to the World Series out of the American League this season.
All right, so the team that's going to the World Series is the New York Yankees. They haven't been or won the World Series since 2009. They've been very deserving of it since 2019, in my opinion, but due to choking, cheating scandals, and not being able to get past Houston, they had their wake-up call. That wake-up call decided to go all out in free agency. They re-signed Aaron Judge when everyone thought he was going home to California to a monster contract. They brought in star pitcher Carlos Rodon from the Giants, so the Giants kind of took 2 L's there, and they're probably going to take another L on opening day tomorrow. But to compliment Garrett Cole, Garrett Cole and Carlos Rodon, easily two starting pitchers capable of winning a Cy Young. Also making his MLB debut and winning the starting shortstop position is Jersey kid Anthony Volpe. Volpe had a great spring, hitting .309 with a .415 on-base percentage and a 1.033 on-base plus slugging. Volpe has all the tools to be an elite shortstop in the MLB with a star-studded lineup: Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, Anthony Rizzo. Now you throw in Anthony Volpe. That's one of the better lineups, not just the American League, but also the MLB as a whole. The American League's best teams are the Yankees and Astros, simply put. A few questions I have with the Mariners are outside at Luis Castillo and Julio Rodriguez. They don't necessarily have that star player that can match up guys like Stanton, Judge, Rizzo, Altuve and Bregman in Houston, Trey Turner and Bryce Harper in Philadelphia, Juan Soto and Xander Bogaerts in San Diego, Freddie Freeman and Mookie Betts in Los Angeles, Ronald Acuna and Michael Harris in Atlanta, and so on. Outside of their ace, Luis Castillo, I don't necessarily trust their rotation. Robbie Ray's a good pitcher, but he had a .500 record last season. Marco Gonzalez, who's the Mariners' fifth starter, had a losing record and a 4.13 ERA. The Mariners would be a wild card team. As good as they are, I don't see them beating Houston. The Yankees and Seattle would also have to play, most likely, both New York and Houston to even get to the ALCS, to get to the World Series. When healthy, the Yankees have one of the best, if not the best, rotation in baseball in Garrett Cole, Carlos Rodon, Nestor Cortez, Luis Severino, and Clark Schmidt. The Yankees even have tons of depth at position in Frankie Montas and Domingo Germán. Also, don't forget about defending AL MVP Aaron Judge, who broke the AL home run record with 62 home runs last season. He's also on a mission, just got named the captain. All the stars align for the Yankees to finally win their 28th World Series as they feel the pressure. Many already view Aaron Boone and GM Brian Cashman on the hot seat to deliver a championship. As good as this team is, they're still going to do whatever it takes at the trade deadline around June, July to boost that team even more. I just think the Yankees are the betting favorite to win the World Series.
Both of you guys made some really great points here. This was a really good back and forth debate on this one. Ramos, the one question that I have with the Yankees that you didn't address is there's just still so many question marks. I get you talk about the trade deadline, but Josh Donaldson's got to have a bounce back year. Left field, I feel like there's still some question marks out there. Are we going to get the same type of production from Gleyber Torres and DJ LeMahieu that you need out of those guys? And when you talk about Anthony Volpe as one of the top four guys in the lineup, when you're running down kind of some of their major hitters, look, I'm a Yankees fan, but there's a lot there that's kind of got to break right. And at the end of the day, yes, we've seen them power their ways to playoff runs in the past, but they haven't been able to get to the World Series, and pitching is what does that, and Derek outlaid that in his argument, so I got to give the argument victory to Derek on this second one. So we're going to the final round here, and that's going to come down to NCAA March Madness. Men's Final Four is finally here. Guys, I got to know who's winning the national championship. Brian, it's back to you.
All right, so start off, I think March Madness has kind of been underwhelming, not really star-heavy matchups, but if I had to pick a favorite to win, I'm going with Miami. They're out of the ACC. To get where they got, they beat Drake, upsetting a much larger Indiana team, beat the 1-seed Houston, and they beat the 2-seed Texas Longhorns. They're one of the best offenses in the country as they're fourth in college basketball in offensive efficiency and the best remaining offense in the tournament. They're also 10th in college basketball in shooting percentage and 33rd in three-point percentage. In comparison, UConn is 48th in offensive efficiency and 59th in three-point percentage. The Hurricanes have 4 double-digit scorers, so they spread the ball around, and all 4 guys average 13+, and Isaiah Wong, George Mason transfer, Jordan Miller, Kansas State transfer Nigel Pack, and Norshad Omier, the big man. Head coach Jim Larinaga claimed Jordan Miller is the most underrated player in the country as he's averaging 15.4 points per game, 6.1 rebounds, 2.7 assists, 1.3 steals, while shooting 54.9% from the field. Larinaga is also a UConn killer. Back in 2006, when he was with the 11-seed George Mason, he beat UConn in the Elite Eight, not being the underdog, and much smaller team once again, and went against a team with 5 eventual NBA players, including Rudy Gay. Larinaga is also used to making comebacks as he's never been counted out and has always been the underdog. In that game against UConn, they came back from down 12 against a much bigger team. This year, they beat a much bigger Indiana team again by 16, and against Texas, they came back from down 13. They have adopted that underdog mentality all season that Miami truly represents. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. They even embraced being an underdog, as they had a video go out on social media saying, "Don't pick us if you haven't all season." UConn's best player in Adama Sanogo, along with teammates Hassan Diarra and Samson Johnson, are fasting for Ramadan, which could be a huge question going into the Final Four, as without eating and drinking, you can't really have that full strength considering he'll have to fast. Against Gonzaga on an empty stomach in the first half, Sanogo had just 6 points and 8 rebounds, and obviously he'll have to step up and march in the bigger moments when he's averaging 17 points per game. Keep in mind that U plays faster than any team remaining in the tournament, and this will be the best way to slow down Sanogo and company, as they've been the underdog before and haven't gone up against much bigger teams and beaten them. And with Sanogo and them fasting and the U playing fast, I like this team to go and win the national championship.
You bring some interesting points. The Ramadan point is interesting. I like a lot of the stuff you touched on. But again, we've got one last argument to hear out. That's going to be Derek telling me who's going to win the men's national title.
I don't know why this is even a question right now. It is the UConn freaking Huskies. You talk about Dan Hurley, ex-coach of URI. He knows how to coach, first of all. And this team has not lost a single game out of conference. You want to talk about Miami being a good offensive team? Well, guess what? UConn just played Gonzaga, and they absolutely annihilated them. And Gonzaga is a better offensive team than Miami. All the analytics point to Gonzaga being a better offensive team than Miami. UConn handled them pretty easily. You want to talk about Sanogo, the Ramadan thing. Well, guess what? You talk about only had 6 points against Gonzaga, whatnot. Well, guess what? UConn ended up destroying Gonzaga, and Sanogo, he probably didn't even have his best game. You talk about Jordan Hawkins, which, if you talk about Jordan Hawkins, this guy reminds me so much of Jeremy Lamb. I understand Jeremy Lamb is not that guy in the NBA, but when he was at college with Kemba Walker, he could shoot. He's a shooter. He can do whatever you need him to do shooting-wise. One of the most underrated players right now in all of college basketball is Donovan Clingan, the backup center for UConn. When I tell you he's underrated, you want to look at pretty much every single team left in this Final Four. He is a starting center on any other team besides the UConn Huskies. He's a freshman, 7'2". People arguably say, in his future that he can be better than Zach Edey. Zach Edey, people say that he's the best player in all of college basketball right now. That's how good, that's how his potential is so high. I talk about Dan Hurley. Dan Hurley, coming from a coaching background, that helps. Jim Larinaga, this is the first time he's been into the Final Four, first time for Dan Hurley as well. But, it's not all about necessarily the experience when coaching. It's about defense. You talk about all you want about Miami's offense. Well, guess what? Have they faced a great defensive team in UConn? They haven't. They just haven't played that good on that level. And you want to talk about this tournament throughout this entire tournament. UConn has been the most dominant team in the entire country throughout this tournament. The closest game was by 20 points. 20 points, for God's sakes. I think it's UConn. I don't think it's even clear at this point. Dan Hurley, I'm a Rhode Island guy, so Dan Hurley, I love you, man. And I got UConn Huskies winning the national championship. And I don't even think this is an argument at this point. I think it's the UConn Huskies.
Guys, I like the points that both of you are bringing to this argument. Ramos, there's some great points here for Miami. They're playing an up-tempo offense, and they've had a lot of success. Derek, you've said it. UConn has steamrolled through everybody that they've faced in the tournament so far. Even though they were close with Iona in the first half, they still ended up winning that game big in the end. Both of these coaches, they're trying to make a name for themselves here in their first Final Four, as I think both of you mentioned. Ramos, I can't imagine that Sanogo is the first player to ever play in the Final Four during Ramadan. You're talking about Jim Larinaga and his defeat of UConn back when we were in elementary school.
Hey, he got to the Final Four with George Mason, though, so it's his second time.
Derek, I really like your arguments that you had here tonight. I think you made great points, and especially when you talk about how they absolutely just steamrolled through a Gonzaga team that's such a high-powered offense. I think Miami's very similar to that. So, unfortunately, I'm going to have to give the victory in this one to Derek tonight. Derek, what are your thoughts on the win?
It's fantastic. I'm moving on to the next one. I'm proud of myself, but got to be better.
All right, he's got to be better. The victory's not good enough. I like the attitude. Fight's not over ever for Derek DeGallo. Ramos, thank you for joining us today. You had great arguments, but that is all, unfortunately. That's everything we've got for Prove Your Point tonight. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time on Prove Your Point.